From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Confusion to our enemies.
If you got a tip for Melissa, the gory details of a dastardly deed, the real story behind a famous case, why throwing the wrapping paper into the fireplace is always more fun than opening the presents on Christmas morning, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host. She's dreaming of a white Christmas and a purple everything else, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell? Yeah, the only reason you like to throw the paper in the fireplace, Producer Mark, is that you're a goddamn pyro. So let's just get that out of the way.
But come on. You know, I think every kid who had a dad at Christmas, I mean, I know my old man, well, he was a pyro too.
Total pyro.
Every Christmas morning, he was hungover because we'd been the night before we'd been over at with Christmas with my dad's side of the family. So that's, we talked about my cousin Doug a couple episodes ago. That's where he was, and my grandpa and grandma. And there was always a little too much of my grandpa's eggnog, which was essentially made from some egg whites, a little bit of half and half, and an entire bottle of
gasoline.
Jim Beam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing.
Right.
So, but they get Christmas morning, and my dad, and so they go home from these parties, and they put us all to bed, and my mom and dad would be up until 3 a.m. putting together our bikes or whatever what Santa Claus was going to give us.
Yeah, and 7 kids.
And,
or at the time, maybe 5.
So my dad is up having with 2 hours of sleep, and yeah.
I'm surprised you all didn't have a bicycle with a doll arm instead of a handle.
It was pretty, somebody up there was watching over us.
That's a good thing.
It never happened. But the thing my dad just loved was taking that man. I mean, you had to give him all the wrapping paper, all the ribbons, all the boxes, because we'd have the fireplace going, and that was his fun. He would just sit there with his cup of coffee, throwing that shit into the fire and giggling like a little 4-year-old. It was... Probably
thinking, just staring into the flames like, what have I done? Why do I have all of these fucking kids I have to feed and clothe? And God damn it, why didn't I wear a condom?
Yeah, well.
I know we're Catholic, but something can be done. I should get something snipped. That's probably what he's thinking, just staring into the flames. They're very hypnotic.
Or at least avoiding thinking about it. Who knows?
Potentially.
Yes.
We had a lovely evening last night. We went to, I imagine most of the tipsters understand that 2019 has not been my favorite year. It has been one of my least favorite years. It's been a real shit year. And I understand that time is not, doesn't run in cycles like that just because I'm thinking 2020 is going to be a better year. It comes down to me. I have to make it better. But there are some things beyond your control, like, losing a family member, losing both of your dogs, being diagnosed with a complicated thing that troubles you every day, your husband having emergency surgery. It's just like one kind of thing after another.
There's been some trials, absolutely.
It's been a real shit year for me, and I have been a really crab ass. I have not been in the holiday spirit, and just really not at all. And there is a show that producer Mark and I have seen many, many times. I started seeing it. It's its 24th year before I even met producer Mark, and Joe Keys is one of the co-authors, and Rob Elk is another. And they're both actors and comics, and I know Joe much better than Rob, but I've gotten to know Rob over the last 24 years, and I've probably seen 20 of the performances over the years of Bob's Holiday Office Party. And if you're in the Southern California area, if you're around Los Angeles, they do it about 3 or 4 weekends in a row, like toward the end of November up through Christmas. The final performance is tonight, Sunday, whatever this is, December 22nd. Yeah. And it's just never Christmas for me until we go. And we had such a great time, and it gets better every year. They change it a little bit every year, and it's the overview is a man who's lived in the same town his entire life, who's fourth generation insurance broker in his insurance company, and his annual holiday party where the town weirdos show up. And Joe Keys plays Sheriff Joe. There's twin sisters who don't look anything alike, who are farmers who made a lot of money not selling their corn being paid by the government.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, and the assorted town weirdos, the pothead, the town whore, the town crazy woman, the guy who wants to come back who was maligned in high school, who now has a lot of money.
The gay mayor who's
the gay
in the
mayor, the wife of the mayor who may or may not be having an affair with Bob, the insurance man. It's really, and it's just a stellar cast of actors. And I laughed so hard again that, things on my body hurt this morning, and I'm still grateful.
I've seen probably 10 years of them now.
Yeah.
And it never gets old.
No.
It's because it's just such a great Christmassy feeling about it.
Right. It's small town Iowa. It's everything, that a large part of the country would experience. And the
pumped
small,
up a little bit.
Absolutely elevated. But, the small town mindset where everybody knows what everyone's doing, even though you don't talk about it, you pretend you don't know, but you passive aggressively mention it. It's brilliant in its simplicity. And I was thinking this morning, it's like choreographed chaos, because there's at several points there's more than one thing going on, and there's several people on stage and at the same time, and it's a real experience.
That part is the thing that I think is must be hardest for them to pull off, because during it builds. The whole thing builds. It starts off with just Joe and Bob at the beginning, and then it grows as the different people show up, and there's
people leave and come back.
Yes,
and weird things happen, and it's just it's brilliant.
But at the end, there's like 2 or 3 parts toward the end when it's just total chaos.
Yeah.
And as Melissa says, like 3 different things are going on at the same time,
and they're all hilarious. And your brain is trying to segment them and figure out. It's a great show. So if you're ever in Southern California at the end of the year, I beg of you to see Bob's Holiday Office Party, because you will not regret it. It's an experience. That's all I can say. And sometimes we just really need to fucking laugh.
No kidding.
So I want to say thank you to all of the amazing tipsters who sent me emails with suggestions on what to do about my nosebleeds. You are all so extremely sweet. Tipster Penny mentioned vitamin K, which she said helped her nosebleeds, and I will be ordering some of that for sure. I still haven't. It's been a little bit crazy, but I did go to the new ENT closer to home, who producer Mark had gone to for some vertigo a month or so ago, and he did a great job. He had to cauterize one capillary twice. It's the way he described it, I go, so you're kind of chasing it? And he goes, yeah, we're just kind of chasing it. So it bleeds in one area, he, cauterizes it, and then it moves to another area where it could, explode, and he cauterized it again. So he did 2 cauterizations, and he was great. He's funny, he's smart, he's weird. I think I couldn't understand why he asked me something, and I even explained it to producer Mark. He's like, well, that's weird, but I think I get it now. He chastised me for wearing a white sweater instead of, like a blood-colored one. So in case I bled, he didn't want to be responsible for, me sending him a dry cleaning bill, although it's a cheap sweater, but I do love it. And then he left the room and let this one, whatever, sit for a while, and then comes back and he's like, so, cashmere. He's like, you know about cashmere, right? Obviously you know about cashmere. And I'm like, I really don't, buddy, but whatever. I just let him roll, because you can't really stop him. He's
kind of kinetic.
Ebullient,
yes.
Yeah. Kinetic, that's a good one. Yeah, he's fast and snappy and talks in his mind. I think his mind is like in lots of different places. But so he's like, so why is it, like $100 cashmere from, the Gap, that only lasts for a year. But then, a really expensive cashmere sweater, that can last you forever. And, I found out it's because they're taking the hair underneath the billy goat's chin, and instead of like keeping it long, like for the expensive cashmere sweaters, they cut it so they can use more of it. And then, it only lasts you for a year. And I'm like, why the fuck are you buying cashmere at the Gap or whatever? You're weird. Anyway, I didn't understand. My head was spinning, and I was like, I'm not rich, buddy. I don't know about cashmere sweaters. You and your doctor's practice, go out and get in your flying Tesla with your cashmere and fly off. I'll be at the mall or at Old Navy. I don't know what he's fucking talking about, but so it was an interesting conversation. He is a good man, and I feel much better. And I'm hopefully blood will not be pouring out my face. So
yes, we're all hoping that, darling.
I want to thank Tipster Penny for her email, and I'm wondering if Tipster Penny is also the person who wrote the new review. I'm putting it together now like I'm a really sharp detective. The newest review, which we're really grateful for, our new 5-star review, is from Snow Penny. It's all one word though. And I remember thinking, oh, I love that name. I wonder if we're talking about a denomination of coin, or if it's someone who likes the snow. So anyway, Snow Penny left a lovely review saying that she listens to a lot of true crime podcasts and she gets frustrated after 5 minutes, but she said just the Tip-Sters is a keeper. And she likes the stories. She likes us, the hosts. So I am grateful to Snow Penny.
Thank you, Snow Penny.
Yes, for her lovely review. And we got some beautiful Christmas cards, an especially beautiful one from Tipster Kiki, who does diamond painting. And I had never heard of it, and I didn't know what it was, but boy, was that Christmas card beautiful, Kiki. It's gorgeous. So yeah, thank you for the beautiful cards from the Tip-Sters. And I promise I'm in a much better, more happy seasonal mood right now, as opposed to, and it's Bob's holiday office party.
Bob Finhead will do that to everybody.
It's a genius play.
And speaking of holidays and all of that, do you realize, sweetheart, this is our 55th episode of the year, our 115th episode overall. It's amazing. It's we got one more episode in season 2, and then we go into season 3. My goodness.
Well, I'm very excited about that, but I do need to speak with you because you just called me sweetheart, and I'm going to report that to HR.
Oh, right.
So
I forgot we're a professional organization here.
Well, I am. I am not sure who you are.
All right,
darling.
Boss. Sorry. Ms. Morgan, may I just say I am
as if I could ever be your boss.
Pleased that
Me
we
too.
have gotten through. I mean, it's amazing
Who
that we
knew?
put out at least one a week with an occasional murder-tizer.
Right.
That's what we're doing this coming the last Tuesday of the year, which is New Year's Eve. We're going to put up a murder-tizer that we recorded early in the year, but it's still a new episode.
It's a great story. Can I just say we've been holding on to it, and we realized there's 5 weeks in December, and we would like to take a little break, so we'd been holding on to it for a couple of months, but it's in time wise it's called an evergreen. It's not going to go out of date, and it's a good one, and I love it, and I can't wait because there's actually a connection to a radio host in Cincinnati who I had, after doing some weird digging, found a quote that she had about the story, and I emailed her and told her I loved her. I didn't know she hosted a radio show though. At the time she was working she's like a foodie, like a chef in the Cincinnati area. And she said, next time you're in Cincinnati, would you like to come on my radio show? And I was like, I'd love to, but I don't, she has a Sunday morning radio show on a big rock station in Cincinnati, discussing food. I think it's called like Amy's Table, maybe. Amy Tobin is her name. And she's adorable and wonderful. And I was like, I don't really cook or anything, but sure. So next time in Cincy, I hopefully will be on Amy's show, which was so sweet of her to ask me to be on her show. But she's adorable, and I can't wait for next week's episode, which is a good one. So this week's episode, the last of December episode of the Unsolved Serial Killers, is one of the bigger labyrinths that I've fallen into. I didn't think so. I thought it was real cut and dried because at first reportage, they say there are 5 victims. But over the last couple of days, I found 5 more. So there are 10 at least, and potentially up to 30. And the sad thing is, this has been attributed to so many different people, and I'm just hoping somehow, some way, we'll find, whether it's, preserved evidence, we'll find that they are connected, and if they are, to who, because it's really ugly, and it's kind of a stumper. But I want to start with this quote from Richard Ramirez, who basically my favorite quote of his is when he had finally been beaten the shit out of in Echo Park or Eagle Rock and arrested. They're dragging him into the LAPD office, and they're like, what's going to happen next, Richard? And he's like, I'm going to Disneyland.
I didn't know he said that.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite quote of that motherfucker.
Oh my God.
But this quote's pretty much right up next to him. Next to that as my second favorite quote of his. Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on a large one.
Oh.
I know.
Oh.
I thought that was a pretty good quote.
Wowie.
Yeah, I didn't know that he could beat the Disneyland quote, but when I found that one, I was like, holy shit. So whether you agree or disagree, this serial killer is a stumper. And you can say that some of the cases are not related. The coroner of Dade County had, obviously this is going to happen in Florida if it's Dade County, had connected 5 of them, 2 of them forensically at the time, even though it was 1975. And it was in a very compressed time from February to August of 1975. But I truly believe there are many more connected. But he connected 2 forensically and 3 via the MO. But I think the other thing is, I encourage you to dig and look, because I've been digging and I've been looking, and I have some, places to go that are not pretty and that have a lot of really creepy, shitty underground information. And there's not a lot there. You have to find pieces and put them together. And sometimes there are differences in ages. That happens quite a lot in journalism. It'll be off a year or 2. There's differences in manner of death. There's differences in location that the bodies were found. But I can just a small section of the news outlets that covered this in early to mid 1975 are the Naples Daily News, the Miami News, that covered it a lot, Tampa Bay News, Orlando Sentinel, Palm Beach Post, Tampa Tribune, and the Sentinel Star. So I don't know if it means in the 70s it was the golden age of newspapers, or if there were just so many news outlets in South Florida.
Yeah, no, there were a lot of papers still back then.
I know, but I couldn't get away from. I mean, I just kept looking and kept digging, and there were so many papers that covered it, but so little true, informational content. It was.
Oh yeah.
It was a lot of supposition and I'm actually even going to read, like a quote. Some of it really bothers me. A quote from a captain who I would like to find him. And I get it. It's 1975. It's a different mindset, a different time. But man, I'd like to find this guy and just fucking put a hurting on him. What he said was so just classist and racist and misogynistic and awful. And he couches it in a way where he's trying to warn women to be safe. And it's just as shitty as all get out. So let's just start with the flat tire murders. And this means a lot to me because just a month or so ago, I was shopping at an event and couldn't even get out of the driveway and noticed a flat tire and called AAA, which I hadn't used in a million years, but was happy that I had them. That's another thing I'd like to say. If you can afford AAA, just please do it. If not for yourself, try and remember I want you to be safe. It's been so long since I've used AAA or had the need to. They handle things differently. The dispatcher who answered the phone was a female, and she said, "First of all, are you safe?" And I thought, well, no, that's an interesting question. And I said, yes, I am off to the side of the road. I'm not in traffic. It's a flat tire. It's not a disabled car. I was able to move it off to the side of the road before I got an alert on my dashboard saying, low tire pressure. And then I went and checked it, and it was completely flat. So I called AAA, and the wonderful tow person who came to change my tire and it's dark because it's, winter and it gets dark at 5 o'clock, which I love. And I know most of you hate. And I'm holding the flashlight for the guy, and he's just the sweetest man. And he said, "Have you ever heard of Benny's Tires?" And I said, "No." And it was only a couple of miles away from where I was. It's probably 5 to 7 miles from our house, but they're open 24 hours. They're right off the 5 freeway. I believe most of their clientele is 18-wheeler, large trucks. They seem to deal in
it's
a
right.
lot of that.
It's right up along the ridge route that goes over the Tehachapi's here, and there's just a ton of big rigs that go through that area, and I'm sure that's who they service. But the fact that these guys were just so awesome is just as somebody who worries about my wife being out,
gallivanting.
With a flat tire when it's getting
Right.
dark. I mean, I was freaking out. I was in Florida.
Right.
Right. I was in.
You were probably the flat tire murderer.
Oh
No, I'm kidding.
Anyway,
He was in Miami. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's always happened. Things always happen when producer Mark's out of town. So I had a flat tire, and I hadn't thought about these poor women who in 1975 were preyed upon, where someone disabled their cars. And then when they needed help, he appeared to be helpful. And then it's their last day on earth. So I was really blessed to find Benny's Tires, who patched my tire. Didn't even have to buy a new one or a retread or anything. They patched it for $18 and sent me on my way. And the next day I showed up with candy and flowers. It sounds like I'm an 1800s courtly man who's trying to ask them to marry me. But they were just the sweet. I was like, here's a flower arrangement. Here's some chocolate. I just was so grateful that they...
You're really a nice person.
And I'm a nice person. But some of these amazing women didn't have a Benny's Tires, open 24-hour place that's honest and reliable and takes good care of you. So on February 1st of 1975, Judith Osterling is 20 years old, and she is walking home from her job at a massage parlor. Now, I don't want you to hold that against her, because this police captain, I think, does that enough for all of us. She could legitimately have been an employee of a massage parlor, which she was. She was a young girl, and she, was working to support herself, and she walked a lot. Or in the mid-70s, she hitchhiked. It was sort of known that she hitchhiked. So she was found dead in a canal. She had been stripped of her clothing. The last time she had been seen alive was at 9 p.m. On actually January 29th. She was always known to use hitchhiking as her, primary means of transportation. And she's found floating in a canal on February 1st. In Broward County. February 20th, 1975, Barbara Davis Stevens, who's 23 years old, was kidnapped from a South Dade County shopping mall, and they have no idea who kidnapped her. She was found stabbed to death. Judith Osterling had been strangled, by the way. So Barbara Stevens had been stabbed to death, and they located her car after she had been gone for, I think it was 5 days. They located her car at the shopping mall. And the thing that bothered me about Barbara, and she can't help it because she's beautiful, this just bothers me so badly. This is a headline from the Miami News, February 14th of 1975. Blonde abandons car, appears to disappear.
Blonde.
First word, capitalized. Blonde abandons car. So Barbara Davis, I will be honest, this just bothers the shit right out of me, is beautiful. And all of these women are beautiful. I think the oldest person is one of the last victims, and she's 27. But they're girls ranging from the age of 14 up to 27, mostly in their late teens, early 20s. Barbara had been separated from her husband for a few months, was living with her parents. Another thing that bothers me, her father was kind of a bigwig. He was the president of Anchor Electric. And the last thing he heard from her in her Camaro. This is I've never heard of this kind of description. Her 1973 cream over silver Camaro. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means paint or if it means cream colored interior, silver exterior paint. But cream over silver Camaro, the police took a statement from her father who said she was going to visit a friend in Coral Gables, and she never arrived. And she had a job. She worked at the First National Bank of Miami, and she didn't show up for work on the 13th of February. There had been some sightings of her at a store called the Golden Triangle, where she was supposed to have bought a newspaper. They, questioned people there who saw her, and she is quite beautiful. They describe her as like 5'8", 140 pounds, green eyes, blonde hair, and they said her hair was a little shorter than the picture they showed, which is long, straight blonde hair, and she really is quite lovely. But the thing that they say that's so weird is that one of her father's employees found her car and said the keys were still in it. I guess maybe they were all out looking for her. The keys were still in it. The doors were unlocked, but there was something suspicious, which the police would, decline to elaborate on, which means her tire was flat. So this murderer was known by a couple different names. He was known as the Canal Killer, the Cutler Canal Killer, Cutler Ridge Killer. Apparently, Cutler Canal was changed names in the 80s to Cutler Ridge, but it's kind of an overall name of the flat tire killer because several of the victims had their tires flattened. And yet I think you'll see he changes his MO, he changes a few things, but as we know, serial killers are not always known to be, you can say, oh, they have an MO, but I don't know that they're always, known to be that consistent. So one of the things that's different is that Barbara owned her own car. Several people owned their own car. Several of them were also rentals, but similar things. On April 12th of 1975, 17-year-old Arietta Tinker was found in a canal not far from where Judith Osterling, victim number 1, was found, really close. There's a map that we will include on our social media when we post this episode showing you the closeness of at least 5 of the victims. Not all 5 that were tied together, but that's why I think this needs someone to look at a bigger picture, look at the macro and not the micro. So Arietta was married, even though she was only 17. I think we know why they got married. She and her husband were separated and they had a 1-year-old son. So obviously she had gotten pregnant very young. They'd gotten married. She had her son and then they were separated. And she was found dumped in the same canal as Judith Osterling, not far from her at all. On June 15th, Nancy Lee Fox, who was a waitress, was seen walking home alone, and she had moved to Fort Lauderdale from West Palm Beach after she had broken up with her boyfriend, and she was, very unhappy but trying to get her life together. She was found dumped in the same canal as Judith Osterling and Arietta Tinker on June 15th. Now this time the canal is just north of the Dade County, Broward County line. So
it's the same canal though.
Yes. And I was asking producer Mark before we sat down to record because he has a much better knowledge of geography than I do. So Broward County and Dade County are just, very close together. And it's just all considered like South Florida.
South Florida. They're 2 counties in the same media market, if you will. It's all generally what, if we lived somewhere else, would call the Miami metropolitan area.
Okay, that makes sense then, because I kept thinking this is covered by more news outlets than I've ever heard of in my life. But it makes sense. There's a lot of people crowded into that area in South Florida, so they probably need a lot of news outlets. So Nancy Lee Fox, 19, found in the same canal, and she had all of her clothing was gone, which they believe that the that the killer kept as trophies. I don't know exactly where they get that, but we'll find a couple of other oddities as we go along. She had been raped, and she had been struck with a blunt object. So she had been rendered unconscious and then put in the canal alive. So official cause of death is drowning, but she'd been hit in the back of the head. So victims 5 and 6 are 14-year-old girls, Barbara Schreiber and Belinda Zetterauer, and they were found in June of 1975, June 18th. And they were hitchhiking at 10 p.m. They were murdered. They had their clothing taken. They had been sexually assaulted, and they were found side by side in the Broward side of the canal, north of the line. They had both been shot with a very large caliber handgun. One of them was shot in the head and the other one was in the chest.
So these are the first murders with a gun.
Yes, he has bludgeoned, strangled, and shot. And we'll find out he also uses a ice pick later. So, So victim 7 was found July 10th of 1975, Robin Loesch. She's 14 years old. Now, some news outlets describe her as 15, but the most I found say 14. Now, she's 200 yards from where Judith Osterling and Nancy Fox were found in the same canal. She's fully clothed. She has on a multicolored blouse, blue jeans, her rings. They think that the killer felt comfortable in the area because he kept returning to the same area, and the bodies were pretty close together. They really, not a lot of distance. And this is a pretty tight window of time from the beginning of February.
It's a very tight.
Yeah. From the beginning, and I'm telling you, I'm adding on more. I mean, they're only 5 and I'm up to 7 and we still have 3 more. And there are some things that connect them that are really awful. So July 22nd, just 12 days after Robin Loesch, is Ronnie Gorlin. Now, Ronnie is 27. She's the oldest of the victims. And her car was found in a North Miami shopping mall parking lot, and one of her tires had been deflated. Her body was found face down in the canal on the Dade County side. She had been sexually assaulted, and all of her clothes were removed except for her sandals. She still had her sandals on.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
All of this is so weird.
She was engaged and was going back to her home in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and she was going to get married the following February of 1976. So victim 9, 8 days later, is Elise Knapp in July 30th of 1975. Elise is 21. She's found in the same way and less than a mile from Ronnie Gorlin, victim 8, the same way in the same canal. She, however, has been drowned in 10 to 12 feet of polluted water after being hit in the back of the head. Now, again, she has been hit in the back of the head. A concussion was, caused, and she drowned in the water. So her manner of death is drowning, even though she had been rendered unconscious. There's only one thing left on her body, and it's her necklace that has a small charm with a Hebrew symbol for luck.
Oh, God.
And it takes this murder, 6 months later, for investigators to think, hey, you know what? She might be related to Ronnie Gorlin. She might be related to, So
it took all that time?
Yeah.
After how many victims? 10?
We're on 9. We're on 9.
So after the 9th victim, some light bulbs are going on.
And it's still not going on because they're still not connected. I'm telling you, I find all of these connected. They've only found 5 connected.
No, I get it. I mean, I'm still saying it's I'm sorry. I'm pounding my
banging
table
on
now because it's like it's so frustrating.
Right. And the sad thing about, I mean, all of this is horribly sad, but Elise Knapp was 21 and she was just working in Florida for the summer. She was on her way back to her home in Flushing, New York, and she had been seen leaving her apartment in Hallandale, and she was her car was found at the Hollywood Shopping Center where it had a flat. So not all, obviously all of these victims had flat tires. Barbara and Belinda were 14. They couldn't even drive, but they were known to hitchhike. Judith was known to hitchhike. It doesn't matter if in 1975 you were hitchhiking. Anyway, we're going to get to that in a minute. Victim 10, who is the only one that may not, in my mind, be connected. And yet it could be, the only person of interest in this case is her husband. So on August 17th of 1975, Esmeralda Gordon, who's 24, and the wife of Seth Gordon, who's an administrative aide to Senator Ken Myers, her Bronze Vega was found in the same parking lot as Ronnie Gorlin. Her tires, however, were not deflated. She was found fully clothed, but it's so odd. Investigators believe that she was killed in her own car because there was quite a bit of dried blood found in her car that was in the parking lot of the shopping mall with no deflated tires. She had all of her clothing on. She had been shot in the head, and they, were like, we think this is a different killer. And we think he may have been trying to use the shopping center thing as a red herring. And it's like,
That was my first thought.
Yeah, it's very... So Esmeralda Gordon is married to Seth Gordon. She's a school teacher. He's an aide to a state senator. They had put an AC unit for sale in the newspaper. They were going to sell their AC unit. They had gone on this Saturday morning of August 17th of 1975. They'd gone to some garage sales, according to Seth. Esmeralda wanted to continue shopping. She wanted to go to JCPenney and price new AC units, but Seth wanted to stay home. So after they'd gone to the garage sales on Saturday morning, she dropped him at home, and then she, took her own car and went to the closest JCPenney at the 163rd Street Mall, which is, this popular mall where Ronnie Gorlin's car was found, apparently. So Esmeralda has her 72 Bronze Vega, which is found in the mall parking lot, and closest to the JCPenney, which is geographically, they lived between two JCPenney outlets, but the one where her car was found was pretty much, closer to her home. It made sense that would be the one that she would be, shopping at. And again, she's found really quickly. Her husband said that she left around noon from their home, and around 2:30, her body is found by a heavy machine operator that's floating in a rock pit. She's fully clothed, again, shot in the head. They believe that she was either shot in the head in the passenger seat of her own car, which doesn't make a lot of sense unless it would be her husband driving, or unless someone overpowered her in the parking lot and said, "Get in the passenger seat, I'm driving." I don't exactly know how all this works, but they feel she was either driven in her car to the rock pit where she was pushed out of the car, or that the killer transported her after he shot her in her own car, transported her in his car and then pushed her into the rock pit. So here there are, 10 victims and probably another 20. And honestly, depending on who you talk to, and there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there could be a lot more.
So you're saying there could be 30 or more?
Yes. And wait till you hear the connections. This is the part that is heartbreaking to me. I mean, I hate when I say that. I have to stop myself from saying that because the whole goddamn thing is heartbreaking. But this would have been, besides the fact that all of these women were beautiful, young, white women, and the fact that it bothers me that one of the first headlines, the first word is blonde, abandons car. Who the fuck cares what color her hair is? These women were all Jewish. Several of them were driving rented or leased cars with something called an E-tag. Do you know what that means, Producer Mark? Is that like a paper plate?
An E-tag?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
As someone who's rented a million cars for all of your travels.
It may have been for, it may be, this is 1975.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure they had like Easy Pass or anything like that where if you went on a turnpike, a machine would read it. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Right.
But I'm not sure they had those back then.
Yeah, I don't. It was in several articles, and I can't find a connection to rental cars, what that means. But several of them had rentals or leases, and they had E-tags. They were Jewish. So I can't tell if this killer, how does he have to stalk them to see if they show up at temple? Or, I mean, how, a tiny Hebrew symbol around your neck, you'd have to be pretty close to someone to see that and understand what it is and know what it is. So it's very odd. So along with, the things that they were white, they were Jewish. Some of them had flat tires. Some of them were hitchhikers. It's very disturbing that if it's one he, changed his MO from shooting to stabbing to blunt force head trauma to drowning to strangling. I mean, all over the map. So obviously many, police agencies feel like that these murders were committed by more than one person. And one interesting theory was brought up by Sonoma County Sheriff's Department Sergeant named Erwin Carlstad. And he actually thought it was the work of the same person who was responsible for a lot of deaths in Washington and Utah, similar MO, disabling a car, picking up a hitchhiker. He felt that the killer was bi-coastal, traveled from the east to the west, committing 30 murders throughout the country. And it really wasn't said out loud, but we all know he means Ted Bundy. So on August 16th of 1975, there was a breakthrough made in murders that happened in Utah when Ted Bundy was arrested and he was trying to evade a Utah cop with just a routine traffic stop. So he obviously is later on linked to murders in Washington, Idaho, Colorado, and Florida investigators were like, oh no, Sergeant Carlstad's like crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all. However, Ted Bundy would eke out pieces of information on what he did. He admitted to 30 murders. It's, pretty clear there are probably more. As he's being walked, to the death chamber, he's like, oh yeah, I kept one of the earrings from this girl. He's giving them little teeny crumbs as he's, led to his own death.
God, that stuff, hearing that stuff, it just always amazes me.
It's overwhelming, the brain that can do that. It's the same kind of mindset to me. It's such a control issue. It's like Edward Wayne Edwards saying, I'll tell you about a couple more you don't know about if I can be given the death sentence in Ohio.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
I need to go home to Ohio to be killed.
Yeah, but Bundy's is even stranger because he knows he's going to his death. Mm-hmm. And he's not. He could, if he was like really scared of dying, he would have said something like, I've got more information on 24 more murders, and here's just one. If you want to keep me alive, I'll tell you about more."
No.
He didn't do anything like that.
Nope.
He just kind of gives just one little piece, leaving a whole bunch of other ones unsolved.
Yep.
I mean, that's incredible.
And holding that back because of the control freak issue is my
right.
They said he was smiling as they're walking him to his death, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well, you're not ever going to find all of them. You're not going to know about all of them. But oh yeah, I just want you to know I kept an earring out of this one, and they found that she was found with one earring, not tied to him at all. Never tied to him.
God.
Yeah, it's just awful." So after they got a chance to talk to Ted Bundy, and he gave a little piece of information here and there if he wanted to, he said, yeah, I did experiment with my MO. I would deflate tires of victims in commercial parking lots. I would offer them assistance. I would, before I kidnapped and murdered them, which, we've seen in the huge number of Ted Bundy retellings of the stories that have been done. I'd totally forgotten about this one, even though I saw it at the time because I'd always been a Mark Harmon fan. But Tipster Tanya, in her stellar paper she wrote for her criminology class for her university in Canada, mentioned the Mark Harmon one. And it's like, Mark Harmon is still a handsome, guy. And Zac Efron, for fuck's sake. But Mark Harmon had a little bit of a dark, creepy edge, which was great. And, part of what Thomas Harris based Buffalo Bill on was Ted Bundy, where, he would wrap his arm up and buy plaster of Paris, at the drugstore and give himself a fake cast, and then end up hitting, like, oh gosh, can you help me, put this into my van that I'm going to kill you in? So he absolutely, Bundy absolutely admitted that he stalked women. He experimented with different ways of rendering their vehicles immobile. At one point, he even tried pulling out like rotor devices or distributor caps, and he, deflated tires. And he said that these all failed on university campuses, I think because there were a lot of guys around that were willing to help a beautiful damsel in distress.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. He said this failed on campuses because I couldn't get there quick enough to offer help before some other fucking asshole came by and,
And saved the woman's life.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, it makes sense that he moved on to commercial, shopping centers where less likely going to be a guy around in the parking lot who can help you. On a campus, I get it. A shopping mall, it's probably a lot of women, not so many men, but it's just an awful MO. But Bundy confessed to, a lot of murders and just before his execution, but he would not be associated with the flat tire cases. He would just not do it. He's like, nope, that's not mine. That's not my work.
So he was very insistent.
He was very insistent that wasn't his, which I kind of get because he's such a, a control freak. I maybe this was too sloppy for him or too all over the place. It's so, the only thing I think he would have reveled in is one of the headlines in August of 1975 from the Miami News, which they said, Jack the Ripper related to 2 dead found in canal. Jack the Ripper. They're calling him Jack the Ripper in 1975. And this map showing the Broward County line and the Dade County line, the line right there, 4 of the victims were found north of the line and 2 of the victims were found south in the canals. There, like I mentioned, Esmeralda was found in a rock pit, and it's just, the whole thing is monstrous, and it bothers me greatly that this is still an unknown entity. I don't believe it's Ted Bundy. I think there are people who have a certain mindset and maybe, come up with similar ways that, are actually pretty smart, unfortunately. If they work, they work. If they don't, you move on. But kind of terrible ways to make a woman feel vulnerable. And in 1975, I was a child, but still, you're taught to, be friendly, say hello. The thing that bothers me the most is this quote. This quote from Captain Elihu Ferris from the Broward County Sheriff's Department. He said that the women's lifestyles led to their deaths.
Okay, great.
He said in some cases the women were walking alone or at night or hitchhiking, and this really bothers me, were known to strike up conversations with strangers. In Dade County, 3 murdered women were described as nice young women, or women who never caused trouble, or picked up men, or invited trouble.
Okay.
So, Captain Elihu Ferris, fuck you. How dare you say that some of the women led lifestyles that led to their deaths? I do not care if you're working in a massage parlor and you don't have a car, so you walk home or hitchhike. It doesn't mean you get to kill me. You just don't get to do that. I don't care if you own a car, if you lease a car, if you rent a car, if you're shopping, if you're walking, if you're friendly. It doesn't matter. You don't get to kill me. It's a terrible thing, even in 1975, for a police captain to segregate women into groups of, some of these led to their lifestyle, led to their deaths. And we're not talking, women who are running up to men with guns and knives and saying, can I buy drugs? Or we're talking about women who are living their lives. These are not compromised lives. These are women living their lives. Hitchhiking was still a thing in the 70s. It really was a fucking thing. No matter how many times your parents said, don't ever accept a ride from a stranger.
Yeah, but even if it doesn't
that's
matter.
Right.
It doesn't
that's right.
matter.
It does not matter. You can hitchhike because you don't have a car. It doesn't give you permission to kill me. It just doesn't. So I'm going to say, if anyone out there has any information on the flat tire murders, and even the ones that maybe don't involve a flat tire but sound familiar, please call the Broward County Sheriff's Office at 954-493-TIPS. That's 954-493-4357. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you'd love to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/just the Tip-Sters.